You're listening to the Primal Happiness Show, a podcast dedicated to helping you thrive in this crazy modern world. Every Tuesday, we explore the nature of how our minds really work, what exactly the human animal requires to thrive, and how we can live happier and more fulfilling lives. If you're new here and haven't yet taken our free class, then there's no better place to get a jump start on reclaiming your primal happiness. It's where we'll guide you step by step through our antidote to today's modern world. Simply head on over to primalhappiness.co/antidote to get the free class and discover how to thrive without having to move to a planet that's not so crazy as ours. But now, your host, Leanne Brook-Tyler.
Hello, my beautiful people. A huge warm welcome back to the show. In today's crazy modern world, men and women are living shallow, disconnected, and unfulfilling lives. So we created the path for those who are ready to reclaim their wildness and actualize their deepest gifts. And the most powerful way you can walk that path is by joining our new Crucible, Waking the Wild Medicine. This is brand new, literally just being created through us in this moment. We're going to be starting that in the winter. We don't yet have a date. I think it's going to be likely the end of November. This is for you. If you know you came here to do important, much needed work, but despite all the years of seeking, you still haven't discovered exactly what it is. You're clear on what you came here to do, but the normal ways of doing business just don't feel aligned to you and maybe aren't working too well either. If you've been successful creating a living, doing something else, but you know your soul is now calling you towards something much, much deeper. Or if you're already doing your precious soul work, but you know you're now ready to create a previously undreamed of level of impact with it. You'll be joining a potent, intimate circle of sovereign men and women, each of you feeling the call to embody your soul work. We'll be harnessing divine archetypes, real magic, and deep embodied rituals to aid you in the reclamation and actualization of the gifts of your wild medicine. These gifts that you'll awaken and actualize are these. You'll uncover the wild medicine of your soul, the gift to the world you came here to be. You'll create the potent ways to administer this medicine via your own unique embodiment in alignment with divine archetypal energies. You will be liberated to become the fullest expression of your soul, giving your deepest gifts in service to the world. And lastly, in material terms, this means you become available for an abundance of connection, impact, and wealth, and anything else your soul desires to flow as you. If you're feeling called to this deepest of journeys, go claim your place now at primalhappiness.co/medicine. And if you've got any questions, there's a link on the page. Just drop us an email and we'll come straight back to you and explore whether this is for you. Now, on to this week's show. It's with Dr. Carolyn Elliot again. She has helped thousands of people dramatically change their lives for the better via her online programs and private coaching. She's done this through using applied Hermetic philosophy, ritual magic, and a cutting-edge twist on Jungian psychology. She's the author of the rising new phenomenal book, Existential Kink, and the cult favourite creativity handbook, Awaken Your Genius. In this show, a follow-up to the last amazing episode I recorded with Carolyn a couple of weeks ago, we explored how our kinks relate to childhood trauma, when we're best served by healing our wounds rather than moving straight into discovering the kinky pleasure in the things we have in our lives that we say we don't want, and how all of this relates to seeing how we can live as the ultimate creators of our lives. This was just as much a juicy episode as the last one with Carolyn, which really is saying a lot. It's probably been one of our most commented on episodes. And I know many listeners then went and read her book and now have joined her wealth membership. So it really made an impact. I really think this one will too. Let's dive into all of that goodness. Hello, Carolyn. A huge welcome back to the show.
Oh, hi, Leanne. Such a joy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my goodness. As I was just saying, I've had so much feedback on our previous episode. I think, and as I said before, I hadn't read your book when we spoke last, and I've now read it, and I can so see why you've had such an impact with it. I feel there's such freshness and also like something that actually works. I've been playing with the practices myself and it's blown me away like how well they work. And it was interesting to me because when we spoke last time, I said to you, like, how would someone find that pleasure? And I really, in fact, this is another thing we maybe could talk about. I could really feel like, oh, yes, of course, you can feel the pleasure. It was only like as I went in to do the practices, I realized how available that was. So yes, I am a huge fan of all of your work. And if anyone has listened to the last episode and hasn't yet got your book, I'd really suggest they do so. So we decided to dive more deeply into some of the things we just kind of touched on and also some things that have come up for me, having been playing with those practices since we last spoke, which you are game for. So let's see what gets created. So something I've been really playing around with and pondering is this relationship between, if we see that how we've ended up here as adults in the world, how we're creating our world, how we be in the world, often is rooted very much in our kind of childhood experiences, conditioning, trauma. It then started to occur to me, so is it true to say that our trauma then creates the things that we have this kinky pleasure relationship to? So I'm not going to say any more because I feel like there's like so many. I don't even think there's going to be a yes/no answer to this. I'm hoping there isn't. But yeah, I'd love to explore your sense of that, please.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So definitely when we look at it chronologically, I'll just speak from my own experience. You know, I have found that I have a lot of kinks surrounding scarcity and like feeling unlovable. And that absolutely, I can trace that to childhood, very painful experiences that I had. And similarly, lots of other people that I've worked with, totally. So then that does draw us towards this thorny question of like, well, Carolyn, are we saying that, you know, even terrible traumatic things that happen in childhood are part of like some kind of desire? And isn't that an evil victim blaming thing to say? And how, you know, and I want to make a big statement, make it very, very clear that I absolutely prioritize the depth and the power of grieving and really like when we've been through hard things in our childhood and life in general, and we feel like deep sadness, that sadness absolutely needs to be moved through. And I think that our current culture, you know, with therapy is great at helping and supporting with that. 12-step groups can be great at helping and supporting with that. For me, I needed like weekly therapy for 10 years to help me grieve and process things that had happened in my childhood. So I would never diminish the importance of that sort of more conventional approach to pain. And after a certain point, the grieving sort of moves through, and I didn't want to stay stuck there. I wanted to move into a different relationship with my childhood experiences, with my current experiences. And that's where the finding the kinky angle came in. And I really discovered that grief and pleasure kind of exist on a spectrum. And my friends, Tani and Leslie from the Light Dark Institute, they do in-person kink workshops. They do a great job of illuminating this. that basically the amount of pleasure that I am capable of feeling in my life is really directly correlated to the amount of sadness and depth and grief that I'm willing to open and be vulnerable to. And a lot of the times people close themselves off and they become numb and they can only feel like a very small window because they don't want to feel the sadness, and then they can't reach the pleasure. So definitely the existential kink is never about bypassing or ignoring or shoving away some part of our experience. It's about being willing to feel everything, to welcome everything, to love everything, and let it all move through, not because we're goody-goody, but because the alternative is just very limiting. And so getting it back to the deep question of the childhood pain and how that causes these, kinky things, and does it cause them, or did we come in somehow with like a soul orientation to these things? I'll just say for me personally, and I know that this is a difficult subject to address because it gets into these unprovable metaphysical woo-woo things. And for a long time, I didn't have, I would hear about theories of reincarnation and karma, and it just sounded like a bunch of like gobbledygook to me. So if it sounds like that to anybody listening, I apologize. Please just give me 3 minutes and then I'll get back onto a more tangible track. But I'll just say through my own experiences, dreams, visions, prayers, and theogenic plant medicine ceremonies, I have come to the place where my sense is that my soul did have a certain resonance to it. It was interested in experiencing extreme vibrations of pain and rejection and unlovableness. It was curious about those, and it gravitated to my parents, who were perfect embodiments of those vibrations that I was attracted to. And I had the experiences with them that I did, and then that shaped my psyche and shaped my journey in the world and the rest of my relationships. So then, people are pretty familiar with the way that patterns get repeated. So I had similar experiences in my adult romantic relationships that I had with my parents. And I needed to apply a lot of grieving and a lot of traditional therapy to that to move through it. And I got to a place where I was willing to be like, hey, because there's the thing about the conventional attitude towards wounds, pain, trauma, is that there's always this dimension of, it happened against my will, this feeling of powerlessness and this feeling of like against my will. And that if I continue to carry with me that, against my will, like things happen against my will, what I notice is that in my life, I continue to get things that give me that feeling of powerlessness and lack of agency, and like something terrible is happening that I don't want to happen. So putting aside all metaphysical questions of what do our souls want and everything like that, really pragmatically, just from a pragmatic point of view, the pragmatism of, okay, this is my life experience, I want to create a change. Even if we, assuming nothing, we can just find out that if we take an attitude of, oh, this experience happened to me, not because I deserved it, not because it's true or really means that I'm bad or that anybody is bad or the universe is bad. It happened because I was curious about that feeling, this feeling that's possible in duality of a lot of pain. And I wanted to have that experience and learn how to integrate it and grow with it. And so I did. And if I just take that attitude, so that story, that unprovable story that nobody can ever prove whether or not it's right, but it has the pragmatic value of putting me into a position of agency and power and of expanding my sense of who I am. So I no longer see myself as this sort of like powerless victim of fate. Instead, I see myself as this strange, kinky, trans-dimensional, far out evolving being who is willing to go into extremely harrowing experiences in order to wake up more and more. So this kind of connects to thoughts that I have about the way that, so again, I'm going to bracket what I'm saying because what I'm saying is very sensitive. Let's talk a little bit about evil. So I 1000% acknowledge that there is evil active in the world, and there is enough of it. We never ever have to go out and create more of it. And I want to say that it's possible to have a relationship with the evil that already exists, that we've already experienced, that's already present, that is a loving and an embracing and a healing relationship. And that, because I think there's this notion that sort of circulates around that in order to be good people, we have to constantly be, in outrage and constantly being like, oh, this is so terrible, it shouldn't exist. But saying something shouldn't exist that in fact exists is patently insane. And it puts me out of harmony with what the divine will apparently is. Because if one believes in an omnipotent, omniscient God, as I happen to do, and something is happening, then it's clearly connected to that divine will. It's not, I can't section out the little parts that I like and be like, oh, this part is the part that divine,
Yeah.
So anyways, so I like to think that God loves absolutely everything in existence, including the really terrible, terrifying, tragic atrocities. They're lovable in some way. They're part of the absolute tapestry of experience that we're having that's completely interdependent. And interdependence was the realization that the Buddha talked about a lot. Interdependence, emptiness, the way that everything is connected to everything else. And again, it can sound kind of vague and floaty to talk about, and yeah, everything's connected. But it becomes very tangible and very concrete in existential kink practice when we become willing to give, painful, intense experiences that seem very, very contrary to what our ego desires, that seem very, very against the will of our ego. When we open our heart to them and really allow them into our bodies and allow whatever divine pleasure is there to be felt, it's a transformative experience that ever after we can't have the same perception of ourselves as sort of, hapless victims of fate. Instead, we're much more in touch with the way that we actually all are children of divinity. And that's not just a nice, sweet little idea. It means that we have vast creative power. And let's see, there's some other little, I think I might be getting off track or rambling a little bit. So I turn it back to you, Leanne.
Oh, that was wonderful. There was so many different things in there that I'm wanting to deepen into. So I'm just trying to just pick a favorite child. I think the first thing that really occurs to me is that, this is how it's looking to me, and it may be that you're saying no. I think there's another possibility here. It occurred to me as I was reading your book that there probably needs to be a level of, let's just say, understanding or willingness to relate to ourselves in this way, first and foremost, in place before we're going to be willing to kind of wholeheartedly say, yes, all of this, I desired, all of this I created. And it also seemed to me that we may have needed to do some work to become more embodied, more sensitized, to even be able to kind of recognize that pleasure within each kink. And I wondered as I was reading, I was like, it feels as though most people wouldn't be in a place where they could kind of directly access these things. Because of the kind of what I've just said, that requires often for many people to have done quite a bit of work to even get to that place where that's like a palatable possibility for them. Particularly then when we're taking this out to really painful childhood experiences. And it's like, and I can hear that you're not saying, oh, that's how people should relate to it. I mean, it is very much how I relate to my own childhood experiences. And obviously that's true for you, but it feels like a step further to say to someone, you must relate to it that way. But is that required? Like, is it required that someone is able to relate to themselves in that kind of absolute creative force over their entire life in order to be able to really have the relationship to what they've created in the way that you're describing? Did that make sense? That was quite a big question.
It's a beautiful question, Leanne. So beautiful. So my mind is blossoming in response to this question. So I'll start with saying, yes, if I want a divine level of power in my life, I need to take a divine level of responsibility. Most people don't want a divine level of magical power over their life. They really like, they really secretly like this experience of like, oh, I'm not in control. I'm being affected by the economy and the past and my parents and my partner and everything's, there's such great pleasure. That's like the feeling of being opposed, of having something against me. Like that's the essence of drama. There's no drama without an antagonist ever. Every story has an antagonist. So humans love stories. We love drama. And we just love feeling antagonized. So as long as people want to enjoy that and they may not say that they enjoy it, they may quite bemoan it a lot, but whatever, they're having that experience. And I think that that's fine. Like the thing in existential kink is that what I realized is that I sort of stumbled upon a kind of teaching, a level of teaching that was actually very, very like only given to initiates, the kind of thing that would only, a guru, a teacher would only reveal to you after you had spent 20 years sweeping the floor in the monastery and meditating every day. And, it's the sort of like very non-dual, very intense, high order alchemical tantric realization. And I'm crazy enough to try to shout it from the rooftops and like the whole wide world. And lots of people very understandably, because it's a very offensive, radical, super tantric alchemical message, are like, no thanks. You're a mean old victim blamer, crazy lady, and I'm going to stay right where I am. And that's fantastic. But when people get to a state where they're like, I'm kind of willing to entertain some larger ideas. Like I've had this experience, I've grieved a lot of it, I've felt very antagonized, and I've gotten all that wonderful juice. And now I'm just kind of curious, like, what if there's a different way of being in relationship with the world? And what if there's a different way for me to, have a creative relationship with everything? So yeah, I guess the long and short of it, I mean, here's the thing. I know people who in my estimation, might still be in that kind of savoring, feeling put upon kind of state of mind. And they can still manifest stuff. They can still like do vision boards and get their, house or vacation that they like. So I'm not saying it's impossible to do practical magic or manifestation unless you go totally into this. I'm saying it works a lot faster and a lot better and a lot easier if you go into it. And that usually when people are able to succeed in those kind of manifestations, what they're doing is they're using, putting to good use the sort of the freedom or the sense of power, the free-floating pleasure energy already in their bodies. They're channeling that. And then what I'm saying is like to unlock more of it, we have to do the solve work, the dissolution of dissolving the ways that there's lots more of that pleasure and energy in these unconscious little knots that are revolving around. So I hope, does that make sense, Leanne?
It really does. Yeah, it really does. Just as an aside, I just remember asking you in the last time we spoke that question around like oh, how did you discover there was pleasure there? Because at the time when we spoke, because obviously you weren't aware of the body of the work, because you've created the body of work. And so there's that kind of moment where you realize like, oh, wow, I'm taking kinky pleasure from this idea of being penniless and queuing at the food bank and all the rest of it. And I remember asking that question. And then what's really blown me away between then and now is as I've practiced into the like how tangible the pleasure is and actually how related it is to sexual pleasure to the point where like as I've been doing the practices, I've often brought in self-pleasure as a kind of real way of kind of deepening into the pleasure. And I realized there's almost the point where I start off with whatever the kink is that I'm looking at and sort of finding the pleasure to where it just becomes actual pure sexual pleasure. It's like, when did that like, what the hell? Could I be possibly having an orgasm over the fact that, I don't know, I've just been completely rejected? Like, what? How is that even possible?
Beautiful. Yeah, I know exactly. I know precisely what you mean. So let me talk. I think this is really fun. This brings into something to my mind that is both very scandalous and very fun, and I hope it shocks and excites your audience. So one way that I like to think about it, so we were just talking about feeling antagonized and feeling like, oh, things can happen against my will. Things outside of me can happen. And then also sometimes I can do things against my will, right? Like I can be mean to my partner without really knowing, I just get triggered and I'm mean and maybe I like eat a whole bunch of Oreos because I feel mad that somebody didn't like my Instagram post, and these like compulsive against my will sort of things. So for a long time in various cultures, that was called, possession by a demon or a devil. Mm. And the notion of the devil in sort of monotheist Judeo-Christian kind of culture is this image of the antagonist, somebody who is opposing. Like the word Satan literally means adversary. And it's connected with the astrological planetary idea of Saturn. And Saturn is like the planet of limitation and death and karma and hard work and all of these like sort of things that we humans don't like because they oppose us and they weigh us down and they antagonize us. So what I've come to understand about magic is that if one wants to do really weird, non-dual, tantric, awesome magic like I do, one needs to come into a different relationship with the antagonist, with the adversary. And if you look at these medieval wood cuttings of witch hunters made, you see there's all these pictures of witches dancing with devils and demons and having sex with them and doing all of these things. And I find that very, very interesting because, of course, those depictions were saying, oh, look at how horrible these people are that they would do this. But what, to me, it's a depiction of, it symbolizes the psychic process of coming into an erotic relationship with the adversary, the antagonist, a playful relationship. Not an I hate you and I'm trying to get rid of you, but I'm going to dance with you. I'm going to make love with you. You're so funny. Look at you opposing me and antagonizing me. You bad, bad boy. Come close. I'm going to give you a kiss. That's the kind of, and from that comes magical power. From that comes the ability to be way more present in your body, in your sexual energy, to not be knocked off your square the minute somebody, doesn't like you or is mean to you. Instead, you stay in your energy, you stay grounded, your eyes have flashing power in them, your words have an integrity and a depth with them. You can make things happen in a much more direct way than when you're dissipating your energy all the time by feeling self-pitying and put upon because the big bad antagonist of life or your own compulsions is, antagonizing you. Instead, you just get to be like, oh, here's this against my will, all this compulsive badness, eating those Oreos, yelling at my partner. Oh, the bill came for the electricity or whatever, the credit card bill, it's more than I could. And it's just like having fun with it. That's what witches do. And when you are willing to do that, then you have a witchy level of power that is spooky, that is intimidating to a lot of people, that is wonderful and delightful, and needs to be, I think, grounded in a lot of compassion and loving kindness. Meditation, I think, is the best way to center and ground that, because certainly it can go off in some funny directions if but I guess, so it's a level of power that was kept secret for a very long time and kept, very shamed, and women were very attacked, because I think it's available to everyone, but I think that women it's especially easily available sometimes to people of the feminine persuasion, just because femininity is connected to the unconscious, the receptivity, the surrender, the Shakti energy. So I was getting a bit excited there. I'm going to pass it back to you, Leanne, because
oh, I love that. I really love that. I had so many different images. I was also thinking about, maybe you mentioned this in your book. I can't remember. I was thinking of Persephone going down into the underworld, and I was just thinking, yeah, she was enjoying that dance. I really love that. What just came to mind as you were talking about kind of grounding yourself and loving kindness work was, firstly, I really appreciate that about you. I can really feel your heart in this. It doesn't feel like these are just kind of heady ideas of like, how do we do cool things? I can really feel like your heart in all of this. And then I was thinking of, it might not seem related, but it's just, I'm going to trust that there's a reason this came to mind. I can't remember where I saw this. It was maybe in a book about chaos magic, possibly. I can't remember. It was a sort of table Venn diagram thing. And it was talking about people's relationship to magic. And it was saying when it's really weak or kind of like denial, that's what leads people into kind of having a very depressed, there is no magic. It's very kind of like the world's being done to me, and very kind of depressed way of being in the world. At the other end of the spectrum, where it's kind of like, oh my goodness, it's all amazing, it's all so magical, but taken to like an nth degree, that's where you can get delusional and kind of just live in this kind of very unreal way of being. And I just had a sense as you were talking about, it's when we're able to bring that kind of whole-bodied, wholeheartedness to it, we're right in that place of like just being in full relationship with the magic, but also full of relationship with that embodied human experience too.
Absolutely. Yes. There's, I think I learned this from I think it was maybe Lama Yeshe, who has this book I really love called Introduction to Tantra. I think he talks about how it's possible to get, like you were saying, like really buzzy and high and like, a sense of anything is possible, which it is, or it's possible to get in this like deadened, dull, despairing state. And the middle place, the grounded place, is accessed through compassion. Because if we cut ourselves, like if I cut myself off to feeling the pain of the world because I'm up in my head and I'm like, oh, it's just an illusion, we're all creators. It's like, well, yeah, and the pain is there. And if I don't feel it, then I'm not going to be in relationship with the experience of what's unfolding. So one of my favorite practices is Tong Len, which is breathing in the pain of others and breathing out my good fortune and happiness to them. And the Dalai Lama once said that it's the most powerful tantric practice available. People think that it's like fun sex stuff that's the most powerful tantra, but he says it's breathing in the energy of pain and transforming it in your heart, letting it burn up and breathing it out as, golden joy. And I agree. I think that is a hugely powerful practice. And I think that existential kink goes hand in hand with it, goes really well with it, because the fact, like being in an orgasmic, surrendered, deeply receptive relationship with pain, with frustration, with everything, it's such a deep, loving blessing to give. And it is a way of embodying divinity and not just giving lip service to it. Because if I pause and I think about the great goddess, or let's think about those tantric deities, like in Buddhism, we can see all these images of Buddhas and their consorts mating together. You can see the same images, of course, in Hinduism and in lots of various suggestive stuff all around the world, Greek art, Egyptian art, this union, this ecstatic erotic union that the divine is having. That's the image of the divine enjoying everything. And when I align myself with that, I get to, access that current that, there's constantly protons and electrons are up to their little naughty, sexy dances. Everything is making love with each other perpetually. And coming into that stream of, we could call it Eros. Eros is probably the fundamental organizing principle of the universe. We can find that idea in Plato. We can find that idea, like I said, in Hinduism and Buddhism, in the Tantras. So and Eros isn't just sexy, it's like all attraction, all sympathy, all, the Eros of friends for one another. It's the binding, connecting force, and it's joyful and it's blissful. And I think there is a way in which our current culture, whatever we want to call it, like modern Western materialism or something. I mean, I sometimes find how do I slow down? How do I say this? If there is a conspiracy afoot, because I spend a lot of time on the internet, I see people talking about conspiracies a lot. And sure, maybe they're all happening, but if there is one, for sure, I think it's a conspiracy of disempowerment. And I think whoever is running everything is very in touch with the reality of magic and, various use of symbols and marketing and branding and everything is all forms of magic. Storytelling in the newspapers, getting people to believe what we want them to believe. And the funniest thing is that in the modern era, there's this spell that's been cast that magic doesn't work. It isn't real. You have no power. Everything just happens to you. Nothing has a spirit. Only maybe humans have spirits, maybe, but definitely not trees, definitely not your chair, definitely not your cat. This whole notion of really just like taking people out of anything that could give them, put them in that vital, blissful, ecstatic, creative, empowered place. All of that has been so repetitively, so intensely denied and shamed and made to seem like, oh, you're a raving moron if you participate in any of that or believe in any of that. And I'm excited about this time in our evolution because I think that is finally being seen through. I think that there's enough people who are like, hey, actually, that whole way of thinking doesn't make me feel alive, doesn't make me feel healthy, doesn't help me do anything. It just makes me miserable. So let's choose a different way. And that's where I'm getting back into the pragmatism of this. Even though there's things in the magical worldview that absolutely can't be proved, just from a very simple day-to-day experience thing, you can prove to yourself that your life goes much better if you adopt certain kinds of orientations to it that are much more expansive, that take a really deep divine level of responsibility for your experience, and that take an erotic level of responsibility for it. Not just acceptance, not just like, oh, it's all okay, not just toleration, but like erotic joy in the previously unacceptable.
Oh, I feel unbelievably our time together is almost at an end. And I feel like we're leaving in such a gorgeous place. What was just coming to mind and where you ended up there, I was like, oh yeah, this is the difference. My path into this work very much was more from a non-dual place. And I was thinking, this really is the difference. I think I love the word curiosity you've used, like your soul was curious about having this range of experience. And I was thinking it's not dissimilar to choosing to read a book or watch a film or play a video game. You're curious about that kind of range of experiences, the tragedy and the comedy and the drama and all of that thing. And my sense was after a few years in that world where you're kind of constantly looking at the illusion of the experience, is that you're not then fully in it because you're so busy saying, it's a bit like reading a book and constantly saying to yourself, well, this is just made up. It's just made up. I don't actually have to be in the experience because I know it's made up. Mm-hmm. And I might actually do that if I'm watching a film and it's too scary or too painful. I do sometimes say to me, it's just an actor. But generally I don't do that. Generally I'm there for the experience. And I was thinking, that's, I think, what can happen is we go so far into this is all an illusion and none of this is real, and use it as a way to actually not to have the experience. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's too scary. So actually I'll just keep disassociating and tell myself it's not real. And what I love the way that, and my journey very much over the last few years has been kind of coming back into the body and into the human experience, and, being able to have that dance between the human and the divine. And I love your work speaks right into that. So they're like, just right in there, oh my goodness, not only can we hold this as being this like amazingly like divine created illusion, but we get to experience it fully, all of it, the sexy, kinky pleasure of it too. And so everything you said there was just like, oh wow, that really is, I think, why we came here. But that's what we were curious about.
I agree, Leanne. And I think that there's a lot of approaches to spirituality. Again, some of them maybe a little bit disempowering, that are very ascetic and are very like, well, this is all an illusion. Let's wake up out of it and go back to the bright white light right now. Let's go. And sure, that's one approach, but I think it's like, well, but we're here though.
Yes, that's what I kept thinking. But then why would we have bothered? Like, why make this trip?
And I think that it's sort of it's just like getting lucid in a nighttime dream. Like we can become conscious in our nighttime dreams that this is just a dream. And yeah, you can just wake up, but you need to sleep and you're in it anyways. So you might as well get lucid in the dream and be like, oh, what cool things could I do? I could talk to the Buddha. I could fly and explore different dimensions. I could make love with my favorite movie star. I could eat a banquet of food. I could turn into Kali Ma and dance. And, there's all sorts of things that we can do when we become lucid. So I'm really interested in that. And I think that that's what the magical path is about versus more mystical or ascetic paths, is this idea of like, yes, let's wake up within the dream and then let's do fun, beautiful things with it. So yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. This has been an absolute pleasure. I don't think I can even compare the two episodes we've done. I think they're both just equally gorgeous, but thank you so much for coming back and being willing to dive back in with me. For anyone that's listening to these out of order, I would suggest anyone who's doing that does go back and listen to our first one. But would you just share where people can find you for anyone that is listening to this one as their first episode?
Absolutely. So my website is carolyngraceelliot.com. And actually, I'm not sure when you're going to release this episode, Leanne, but from September 21st to September 28th, 2020, we are doing applications are open for my Wealth program, which is this amazing alchemical membership community where we help people transform their lives. And it involves business teachings and teachings about all the trashy mysteries of money and love. That's what I like to call them. Money, love, and trashy, and they're very, very deep. And we do that in Wealth, and we have amazing virtual social events. So carolyngraceelliot.com/wealth is where more information about that can be found. And also my general website. People can join my email list and they can opt in and they'll get free chapters from the Existential Kink book. People can also follow me on Instagram. I'm Carolyn Elliot _ and Elliot has 2 L's and 2 T's. And I also have a group on Facebook called Existential Kink. So if people read the Existential Kink book, they can join the Existential Kink Facebook group, and that's run by one of my wonderful trained Existential Kink coaches, Sheena. So yeah, there's a lot going on. And oh yes, if people are interested in coaching, I've just run a coach training program, and I now have these 16 amazing coaches who are trained and ready to go. So also if you join my email list, you can get more information about that. And I think that covers it as far as reaching out.
Oh, I'll see what we can do to get this one out ASAP so that it's ready for people who could be great fit for wealth. So yeah, I'll see if we can do that. We should be able to get it out in the next day or two. So that was the 21st, I think you said, was it?
Yeah, it's from the 21st to the 28th, our application period.
Excellent. I'll see what we can do. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. I suspect we've got another episode in us at some point. So I'm hoping this isn't a goodbye forever, but a goodbye until next time. But wow, that was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne.
Wasn't that amazing? Here are my best bits. It's important to grieve and move through childhood trauma before we move into using existential kink practices to move into a different way of being. The amount of pleasure we can experience is directly correlated with the depth of sadness we're willing and able to feel. Carolyn holds it that her soul was curious to experience the kind of childhood pain that she had. This is, of course, a radical level of ownership to have over our experience. And for many, it will be a confronting idea. And yet, the sense of agency it can provide is incredibly powerful. There's a level of readiness we likely need to bring to this work. We could call that a connection to the divine and to the body. Ultimately, to have divine power, we need to be willing to take divine responsibility. If you'd like to get notes and links for everything we spoke about this week, do hop on over to the show notes, and they're at primalhappiness.co/episode 296. And if you are feeling that call to embody your soul work, come join the potent and intimate circle of sovereign men and women, each of you feeling that same call from your souls. Go and claim your place now at primalhappiness.co/medicine. If you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, head on over to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, or your Android or iOS app of choice and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get each episode delivered straight to your device as soon as it's released. And we have got some amazing ones lined up. We really have some real treats. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. Catch you again next Tuesday.